Betrayal leaves a scar unlike any other. It's more than just pain. It's a poison that makes you question everything you thought was real. The person you trusted most becomes a total stranger, and in the wreckage, you start to doubt your own judgment. The memories you once cherished become contaminated, replaying in your mind like a movie you can't turn off. You're forcing yourself to search for the clue you missed, that flicker of dishonesty in their eyes, the exact moment the story changed without you knowing. It's a gut-wrenching psychological dislocation. The world you built with that person collapses, and you're left standing in the ruins, just wondering, how could I have been so blind? But what if that betrayal wasn't really about you? What if it wasn't some cold, calculated choice, but an eruption of a hidden, darker self that lives inside everyone, even the best of us? What if the person who betrayed you wasn't a monster in disguise, but just a normal person who lost a war inside themselves? And here's the most unsettling question of all. What if our own hidden parts helped set the stage for that betrayal to happen? These aren't easy questions. They pull us away from the simple story of victim and villain, good and evil. They drag us into the murky, complicated, and often terrifying territory of the human mind. This is the world explored by the legendary psychiatrist Carl Jung, and his answer to this whole mess lies in one of his most powerful ideas, the shadow. To understand betrayal, we have to understand the parts of ourselves and others that we refuse to see. We have to be willing to flick on the lights in the basement of our own minds and face whatever's been locked away down there. Because what we don't own eventually owns us. And whatever we leave in the dark will, sooner or later, find its own way into the light, often with devastating results. This isn't about making excuses for what happened. It's about understanding how the soul actually works, so we can finally move from a place of shattering pain to a place of profound and unbreakable wholeness. Betrayal is a unique kind of psychological violence. A physical attack is an assault on the body, but betrayal is an assault on your reality. It's the demolition of the world you build with someone else. A world made of promises, shared memories, and a million unspoken agreements. When that trust shatters, it's not just one promise that breaks. No, the entire foundation of that reality. It just turns to dust. The first thing you feel is shock. And then, disbelief. Your mind scrambles to make sense of two opposing ideas: the person you thought you knew, and the person who just did this. The mental gymnastics, they're just exhausting. You dig through the past, replaying every conversation, every touch, every shared glance. Was it all a lie? Were there signs? And how did I not see them? This obsessive loop. It's your mind's desperate attempt to find solid ground in a world that's suddenly turned upside down. You need a story that makes sense, because the alternative, that reality, can be so completely fake. Well, it's just too terrifying to handle. This leads to a deep crisis of judgment. If you were so wrong about this person, someone you knew so intimately, how can you trust your read on anyone else? How can you even trust yourself? Betrayal, it's a poison that seeps into all your other relationships. You become suspicious, guarded, always on high alert. You start seeing potential betrayal everywhere, because the one place you thought was safe turned out to be the most dangerous of all. And then comes the shame. This is, well, maybe the most poisonous part of the wound. We feel stupid for trusting them. We feel naive. We start to internalize the betrayal as a reflection of our own self-worth. The painful, unconscious thought is, if I were better, more worthy, more lovable, this wouldn't have happened. It doesn't matter if that logic is broken. In the heat of the moment, it feels completely true. Someone else's action becomes a verdict on your entire being. This storm of shattered reality, corrupted memories, and deep shame, that's what makes betrayal so much more than just getting hurt. It's an identity quake. It forces you to ask, who am I now after this? Who am I if the story I told myself about my life was fiction? For many, the world becomes a colder, scarier place. Love feels like a risk not worth taking. And trust? Well, that becomes a currency they're no longer willing to spend. We get trapped in this broken state, replaying the pain on a loop, searching for an answer that feels just out of reach. But Carl Jung would tell us the answer isn't found by looking at what the betrayer did. No, it's found by looking inward, at the very structure of the human soul. He would tell us that to really get what happened, we have to go deeper than the act itself. We have to explore the hidden landscape of the unconscious, because it's from these dark grounds that the seeds of betrayal grow. We have to begin our journey into the shadow. To find our way through this mess, we need a guide. Our guide is Carl Jung, a giant in the history of psychology. He was once a close colleague of Sigmund Freud, but he eventually broke away to follow his own path, a path that explored the spiritual, mystical, and collective parts of our experience. He wasn't just interested in what made the mind sick, he was fascinated by the soul's journey toward becoming whole. He called this journey individuation, and he said that at the very start of this journey, there's a critical encounter. As he famously wrote, the meeting with oneself is, at first, the meeting with one's own shadow. So what exactly is this shadow? Picture your personality as a house. You've got the living room, the space you show to the world. It's well lit, tidy, and decorated with all the qualities you're proud of. Your kindness, your intelligence, your humor, your strength. This is what Jung called the persona. The word comes from the Latin term for the masks worn by actors in ancient plays. It's our social mask, the version of ourselves we want the world to see and approve of. It's not necessarily fake, but it is incomplete. It's our good side, dressed up for guests. Now, that same house has a basement. And into this basement, we shove everything we don't want to look at, everything that doesn't fit with the perfect image in our living room. We toss down our envy, our greed, our rage, our lust, our laziness, our deep-seated fears, and our secret desires for power. Then we lock the door and do our best to forget it's even there. This basement is the shadow. The shadow holds all the parts of ourselves that we've repressed and disowned. Jung put it simply. The shadow is the thing a person has no wish to be. It starts forming when we're little kids. We learn from parents, teachers, and society what's good and bad. When we show a trait that gets us a stern look or a punishment, maybe it's selfishness or anger or even just being too loud, we learn to push it down. We hide it away in our unconscious mind so we can stay good and lovable. This isn't a bad thing. It's a survival strategy. But every time we reject a piece of ourselves, we're feeding our shadow. The problem, Jung warned, is that these repressed parts don't just go away. Down in that locked basement, they don't die. They fester. They mingle. They get stronger in the dark. The more perfect and polished our persona is upstairs, the darker and more powerful the shadow becomes down below. The nicest person you know, the one who never gets angry, might be sitting on a volcano of rage in their unconscious. The person who is endlessly generous might be suppressing a deep, starving selfishness. This creates a ton of tension inside us. The classic story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is the perfect example. Dr. Jekyll is the ideal persona, respectable, noble, and morally perfect. But his shadow, Mr. Hyde, is the monster made of everything he pushed away. Because Jekyll denied his shadow so completely, it didn't just leak out. No, it had to burst out as a separate, monstrous personality that ended up destroying him. And that's the key. Jung warned everyone carries a shadow. And the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. If it is repressed and isolated from consciousness, it never gets corrected and is liable to burst forth suddenly. That, bursting forth, is the secret to understanding the dark psychology of betrayal. Betrayal often isn't the product of a cold, calculating villain. It's the shadow, starved for light and attention, finally kicking down the basement door and storming the living room. It's the eruption of everything a person has refused to be, now demanding to be seen. This is the aha moment, where the theory of the shadow slams right into the raw pain of betrayal. And the connection isn't just about the person who betrayed you. It's a complex dance between their shadow and often the unconscious parts of the person who was betrayed. Let's start with the person who did the betraying. People rarely see themselves as the bad guy. In their own mind, they are their persona, the good friend, the loving partner, the loyal colleague. But their shadow is running a totally different program in the background, driven by all the needs and feelings they've pushed down. When the shadow erupts, it's a desperate and often destructive attempt to finally get those needs met. Think about it like this: the unfaithful partner. A man prides himself on being a good husband, reliable and steady. That's his persona. But he has ruthlessly pushed down his own need for adventure, spontaneity, or maybe just feeling desired by someone new. That energy doesn't disappear, it builds up in his shadow. One day a chance for an affair pops up. It's not a logical choice. It's his shadow, starved for the shadow. Wildness he's denied himself. That grabs the wheel. Afterwards, his conscious mind will scramble to invent a story to justify it. He'll tell himself, "My partner doesn't really get me," or "We were growing apart anyway." This isn't the real reason. It's a story he tells himself to protect his ego from the terrifying truth that he isn't the man he thought he was. He was hijacked by a part of himself he refused to even meet, the disloyal friend. A woman sees herself as a deeply supportive friend, but deep down, she holds a secret envy of her friend's career or happiness. She would never admit this, even to herself, because envy isn't part of her good friend persona, so it festers in her shadow. One day, she accidentally spills a secret, or makes a cutting remark she calls a joke. This isn't a premeditated attack. It's the shadow's way of leveling the playing field, of letting out the resentment her conscious mind keeps on lockdown. As Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. Betrayal is one of those absurd things. A key tool the shadow uses here is projection. This is when we take a part of our own shadow that we can't stand and see it in someone else. The betrayer often projects their own issues onto the person they betray. The partner who is cheating might suddenly become paranoid that their loyal partner is cheating on them. The resentful friend might accuse their genuine friend of being selfish. By making you the bad guy in their head, they unconsciously let themselves off the hook. Their shadow's actions feel more justified if you're the one with the problem. In their twisted story, their betrayal becomes a reaction to your supposed flaws. They aren't just betraying you, they're betraying you to escape the crushing tension of their own inner conflict. They're trying to destroy in you what they can't face in themselves. Now we get to the hardest but most powerful part of all this. It would be easy to stop there, to just say that betrayal is the other person's fault because of their unchecked shadow. But Jungian psychology asks for more. It asks us to turn that mirror around and ask a tough question. What role did my own shadow play in this? This is not about blaming the victim. Let's be clear, you're not responsible for what another person chose to do. But you, Dartu's, responsible for your own awareness. Sometimes, betrayal is a brutal but powerful signal that we've been blind to parts of ourselves. How does our own shadow make us vulnerable? Often this looks like ignoring the red flags. Sometimes, the other person's shadow wasn't completely hidden. It flickered in a moment of casual cruelty, a pattern of small lies, a flash of intense jealousy. But if we're desperate for the relationship to be what we want it to be, our own shadow might step in to keep us blind. We might make excuses for them. Oh, they're just stressed out, or they didn't really mean that, because it's easier than facing the awful possibility that we've trusted the wrong person. That denial, that's our shadow at work, trying to preserve a fragile peace. There's a weird law of psychological gravity. We are often drawn to people who live out the very parts of ourselves that we've repressed. The super good and agreeable person might find themselves intensely drawn to a rebellious, chaotic partner. Why? Because that partner's shadow is acting out the freedom their own shadow desperately wants. The relationship feels exciting, like it, completes you. The problem is, that's an unstable foundation to build on. The very thing that drew you in, their untamed shadow, is often the same thing that leads to the betrayal. And the betrayal hurts so badly because it's not just them betraying you. It feels like a part of yourself that you trusted them with has suddenly turned on you. This is what makes betrayal such a powerful psychological mirror. The experience, as agonizing as it is, forces you to look at everything you've been avoiding. The pain is a messenger. It points to your own disowned pieces. If you were betrayed by someone selfish, it might force you to finally confront your own passivity and learn to set boundaries. If you were betrayed by someone deceitful, it might force you to see where you haven't been honest with yourself. A Jungian thinker, James Hollis, suggests asking a different question after a betrayal. Not, why did this happen to me? But, what in me was called to this experience, and what in me must now grow? The betrayal shatters the persona, not just theirs, but yours too. It destroys the illusion that you're just the good, trusting person who was wronged. It reveals that you're a complex, whole human who, maybe through a lack of awareness, helped create the conditions for your own heartbreak. That's not a judgment. It's an invitation to a much deeper level of self-awareness. When the fire of betrayal sweeps through your life, you're left with a choice. You can stay in the ashes, consumed by bitterness and a constant fear of being hurt again. Or you can see the scorched earth as a place for new growth, a chance to rebuild something stronger, more authentic, and forged in the very flames that tried to destroy you. This is the path of integrating your shadow. Before we find the right path, we have to recognize the dead ends. The first is the path of revenge and resentment. This feels good at first. You turn your pain into anger, and it feels like power, but it's a trap. By staying locked in a mental battle with the person who hurt you, you're letting them control your emotional life forever. You're chained to them by hatred. All your energy goes to them, not to your own healing. It's not power. It's just another prison where the shadow of bitterness eats you alive from the inside. The second dead end is permanent victimhood. This is when you decide to build walls around your heart, so thick that nothing can ever get in again. You decide trust is for idiots, and that everyone will let you down eventually. This might protect you from future pain, but it also cuts you off from all future joy, love, and connection. As Jung said, a person possessed by their shadow is always standing in their own light. Choosing cynicism is choosing to live a smaller, darker life, forever defined by your wound. Both paths are understandable, but they both fail, because they're just reactions that keep the trauma in the driver's seat. The real way forward isn't a reaction. It's a conscious, brave action, the work of integrating your own shadow. Jung was fascinated by the ancient tradition of alchemy. The alchemists wanted to turn lead into gold. Jung saw this as a perfect metaphor for psychological transformation, turning the lead of our suffering and our shadow into the gold of self-awareness and wholeness. This is what shadow work is. It's the brave process of making your own darkness conscious. So, how do you actually do this? First, stop focusing only on what they did and start looking at what their actions stirred up in you. As Jung wrote, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Get out a journal. Make a list of the things about the betrayer that make you the most angry or disgusted. Their selfishness, their cowardice, their dishonesty. Now take a deep breath and ask the scary question. Where in my own life, even in small ways, have I been a little selfish, a little cowardly, or a little dishonest? This isn't about saying your actions are the same as theirs, by the way. It's about seeing that the seeds of everything human exist in you. When you can see the echo of their shadow in your own, you take your power back. Listen to your pain. Your emotions are messengers from your unconscious. The intense pain from the betrayal. It's pointing to an older wound. Maybe it triggered a deep fear of abandonment from your childhood. Or maybe it poked at a core belief that you aren't worthy of love. Instead of pushing these feelings away, get curious. Ask yourself, what is this pain really about? And what older story does this remind me of? When you listen to the emotion instead of just reacting to it, you start to heal the root of the problem, not just the new cut. Now let's talk about finding your golden shadow. The shadow isn't all bad, It also holds the amazing positive qualities you've repressed, because someone once told you they were wrong. This is what we call the golden shadow. Maybe you were taught that being assertive was bossy, so you learned to be passive. Maybe you were told celebrating your success was arrogant, so you learned to play small. This betrayal, in fact, might be the brutal wake-up call you need to reclaim those lost superpowers. Maybe you need to integrate your golden shadow of righteous anger to finally set firm boundaries. Or maybe you need to reclaim your golden shadow of ambition and finally go after your own dreams. Integrating the shadow isn't just about accepting your flaws. It's about reclaiming your full power. The ultimate point of this work is to change your goal in life. Your old goal was to find a person you could trust completely, to build a safe world that could never be betrayed. But this goal, it's based on controlling other people, which is impossible. The new goal, though, is to become so whole and self-aware on the inside that another person's betrayal, while it will still hurt, can no longer destroy your sense of self. When you've integrated your shadow, you develop an unbreakable loyalty to yourself. You know you're not just the good parts of your persona. You are a whole person, capable of both light and darkness. This self-knowledge, it gives you a solid core. Another person's actions, then, they become what they really are. Their actions, coming from their inner mess. It's still painful, but it's no longer a verdict on your worth. It no longer shatters your world. You can hold the pain without becoming the pain. We started this journey with a wound, the unique, reality-shattering scar of betrayal. We learned to see it not as a simple act of malice, but as a volcanic eruption from the hidden depths of the human soul. With Carl Jung as our guide, we walked down into the basement of the psyche and met the shadow. All the parts of ourselves we've disowned. When left in the dark, they eventually burst out in destructive ways. We saw how betrayal is so often the tragic end of a person's inner war, a war they might not even know they're fighting. And in the toughest part of the journey, we turned the mirror around. We saw how our own unintegrated shadow can make us vulnerable, pulling us into the very dramas that'll break our hearts. It's all in a desperate attempt, to make us see ourselves more clearly. But understanding is just the start. The real point of all this is transformation. Betrayal is a fire. It can either consume you, leaving you as a pile of bitter ash, or it can be a forge. It can burn away your illusions, your naivete, and your habit of abandoning yourself. In that fire, you can forge something new, a self that's resilient, authentic, and unshakably loyal to its own truth. The goal isn't to become immune to betrayal. That'd mean becoming immune to love and trust and life itself. The goal is to build a wholeness inside yourself that no one can ever take away from you. It's about doing the brave work of owning your darkness so it no longer owns you, and reclaiming your light so you can finally shine. The journey through the dark psychology of betrayal, it doesn't end with an answer to the question, why did they do this to me? It ends with the answer to a much more powerful question, who have I become because of it? When you can stand in the aftermath, no longer a victim but an alchemist, you will know that the very thing that was sent to destroy you actually gave you the greatest gift of all, the chance to become who you were always meant to be. This journey of self-discovery, it's one of the most important we can ever take. If this exploration of the shadow resonated with you, I invite you to share your own reflections down in the comments. What has your experience with betrayal taught you about yourself? Your story. It might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to feel less alone. For a deeper dive into these ideas, consider subscribing for more explorations into the landscape of the human mind. And finally, a challenge for your own inner work. Take a moment this week and journal on this prompt. What quality in other people irritates me the most? And where might I find a tiny hidden echo of that in myself? Thank you for walking this path with us. Remember, the goal isn't to be perfect. The goal is to be whole.